Hi, and welcome to template development number 3 in the parallel line development series. This is our last development that we're physically going to do in parallel line development. We will be doing some more later on when we combine some of the different techniques, but this one will basically round off the section on parallel line. Now, this is the drawing that you have in your package. So this should be available. I'll give you printed copies of this one. Basically, you can see that we're based on the same sort of rectangle as far as the side view of the tube is concerned. And then there are actually two features coming down at 45-degree angles as frustrum lines. There's also a circular feature. You can imagine this sitting on another piece of tubing going through the bottom of the object. And you can see both of these features detailed down in a right-hand isometric view, which basically shows you what the actual cutout is going to look like. Now, the fact that we've got two frustrums on this top section can cause a few problems. And therefore, we normally, when we do our development lines going out from these, we would color these in different colors so we don't get confused with any lines coming from the left-hand frustrum to lines that are coming from the right-hand frustrum. Now, from the handout, you'll notice that if you look very, very carefully, if I could actually get that back up without going through the tools, if you look very, very carefully, there are in fact yellow lines on there. It wasn't a great color to pick. It's great on the black screen when I was drawing it, but as soon as I turned it onto white paper, yellow become a little bit difficult to see. But you can see that there are development lines coming across in yellow. That will be dealing with this smaller section of the frustrums. The other two coming down from the side, you can see, if you can imagine, we do the shortest section, which will be over here on the left. They're developed across in green all the way up to the top. So you can see from the side here, we're going to follow the green. Then we're going to follow the yellow. And down the other side, we're going to follow the green. The bottom one, we could actually use the bottom of this section to divide it up and then sweep these lines upward. But I think for the sake of clarity, we're going to draw our circle and our arc completely separate. So we're going to have our circle down here, project the lines up through, and then be able to develop these lines across onto the pattern just as before. Another feature that you might notice is there are far more lines on this development than was on the first one. But as you can imagine, with all of these curves and a number of frustrums, we want to get as close a fit as is humanly possible. And that's only normally done by increasing the number of divisions we do around something like this circular object. Okay, so let me get this back to the first drawing, and we can see that we will need a 2-inch by 4.5-inch rectangle before we start doing the rest of our drawings. Okay, so it's 2 by 4.5. So I'm going to move this thing out the way, and we're once again looking at a brand new drawing sheet. Nothing's been set up yet. You can see by some of these icons down on the bottom part of the screen, the F9 will have to be set, which I've just set now. It's on blue now. The polar's on, the grid is obviously on, we can see it, and the only thing we really need to do is to click into the command bar and detail down Z space A, enter, and that will blow the whole thing up so that we got our full paper size showing on the screen. So, first things first, same as before, the last rectangle that we put on there was for the other tube in exercise number 2. So I'm just going to pick a point on screen, pull it away, and then type down at, which is shift 2. It's going to be 2 across in the X, comma, 4.5 up in the Y, and enter. That's the first point. Now, as far as these lines, these frustrums that go on the top, those ones are going to be pretty simple. We can put the circle directly on the bottom if we use the 2-point command, but we've also got this placed using the snap on some place where we can actually click across. There's going to be 4 individual points on the top of this square. So we can left click the polyline, bring it down to this corner and count across. 1/2 inch, as you can see on the screen, 1 inch, and there is the 1.5 inches. Okay, so we can start our line from there and click. Okay, now from that point we need 1 frustrum down at 45 degrees, and we can enter that simply by making sure that if we put a frustrum down there, if we make one 1 inch long, that we do a -45, because we will be going clockwise. Okay, remember, if we go counterclockwise, it goes with a positive number like that one. Okay, to get it down the other direction, we could calculate what 45 degrees away from 360 would be and enter that as a positive number, or the easiest way, put it down as -45. So let's do that. I'm just going to enter on the command bar at, then remember we want a length. In this case we're only 1/2 inch away from the edge, so if I put 1 in there, that's going to be a long enough line to give us the frustrum. Then I'm going to do shift and the comma to give me the left hand angle bracket, and -45, and enter would give me the line going down against the normal rotation of the line, right? So that puts the first one on. I can enter that and break the line off so it just leaves the frustrum. Second one, same again. This time we're going to want to come from the 0 point all the way around to the 180 plus 45. So that's going to be 225. Now this is also 1.5 inches away from the corner, so I'm going to make it a decent 2 inches, maybe even 2.5. Maybe I'll make this one 2.5. So I'm just going to go down again, click on the command bar so I can start typing. Shift and 2 gives me the @ sign. I'm going to make it 2.5. Then I'm going to go shift comma to get my open angle, and then I'm going to do a 225 degree angle, and that puts the second frustrum on. And I'm glad that I made it 2.5, because I think it would have fallen short if I didn't. Okay, so right click, hit enter, that will break the line off, and we have our 2 frustrums in place. The last part is putting the circle on the bottom. And that's just for the arc on the bottom. So I'm going to click on that circle command so I can see all of the different circles, and in this case I'm just going to select the 2 point. So I select the 2 point, come down to the first corner and click, move across to the right hand and click, and that basically is our arc that we're going to need in the bottom of this. Now if you want, just for clarity, you could remove any of these other parts. Okay, you can trim all this out and just leave the actual shape itself. Personally, I think I'm just going to leave it here, because I could always develop that line and just use this top part and just put my lines up from there. Okay, so just going to move this up and out the way, and now I'm going to stick my circle right down here, and then I can do my developments and then just mark them off as they come across this here. Okay, I might trim my development on my parallel lines in a little bit to there, just so that it shows them on the side detail. Right, so remember we need to divide this one up into 24. We cannot guarantee this thing is correct to the center line, or actually we might be able to. If we've made it to the side, it should, or we could put one dead on that center point, I think. But let's have a look. If we go to the midpoint of this and come down, yep, I'm just going to go a little bit past where that center point is. But because it's 2 inches wide rather than 1.5 inches, the center point of this line will fall on one of those snap points, so we're pretty lucky. Okay, now remember, we got a 2 point circle at the moment. So we're going to want to change that back to a center radius, or we could do a center diameter. Okay, so I just selected the center diameter. I'm going to pick the end of that line, and I'm just going to pull that thing out and type 2, then enter. And that puts our circle on. Okay, so the next thing to do is to put one of our lines on there. We can get rid of this little placement line now. It was just to prove that this thing was directly under where we needed it. I'm going to grab my polyline, come down to the outside of this shape, and left click so that it attaches to the center point. I'm going to place this upwards. It's just a fad, just a thing that I generally try to do. And then I'm going to come to this array. Of course, we hit the caret because we need to go down to the bottom and select the polar array. Okay, so having selected the polar array, we need to come down. It's saying select the objects, which is the line that we put on. And then for the base point, the center point of the array, is going to be the end point or center of that circle. And again, it comes up with our 6 lines. That's the default. So we can go up here and select this to 24. I think I'll use the slightly different technique, one that we used last year. Just move this up a little bit. And that is, I'm going to go down here. I'm going to say I enter 24, enter. And that gives us the number of these marks around the outside. These are the divisions on this circle. We can now develop these things upward. Now at this point, as again, same as before, we're not going to need the outside lines. But this one is very close, this one in between there. That one's very close to where that edge would be. And it's also nowhere near one of the snap points. So I'm just going to hit my F9 key to turn the snap point off. That gives me a bit more freedom. And I'm going to close my array as we're officially done with that part of the drawing. I'm only going to need, because this is an even number, I'm only going to need to develop up 1/2 of this so that it goes up past this top line. So I'm going to grab my polyline, come down. As I said, we don't need the side one, but we do need the one next to it. Bring this thing up past the top line, and we're good to go. You can see that's fairly parallel. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit to that circle and maybe just pan it across a bit so I can get a better view. Now we're going to copy that line the same as we did before, and I'm just going to grab that little line, and then I'm going to copy it from its end point all the way around, just like the second exercise. This time there's a lot more going on because of the amount of divisions we've got. But again, I don't need to copy that one on the right. That will be taken up by the edge of the rectangle. So let me pull that down, and now we can see where we've got these lines. Now, like I said, it's good if we could have different colored lines on these sides and do the projections across from there. The ones on the bottom, you can keep them all the same, and basically, because we're dealing with a circle, each of these divisions around this edge basically will mirror across the other side. So we only really need this top part. Now, if you want, we can delete this bottom part of the circle to stop it getting in the way, and even trim off some of these lines because we know where they come from, so that they hit this line here. Okay? So, what are we going to do? Well, we can grab a polyline, and you'll notice I'm doing all this in white because I'm actually used to it, but when I get up to this frustrum, I will change these colors. I am basically going to grab a polyline, come from this bottom corner right on the side of the rectangle. I'm just going to pull a line across. That should be plenty for what we need. Okay? And then I'm going to copy this line upwards to that point there. Because again, these lines are going to be straight whether you use the left-hand side of that arc or the right-hand side of that arc. All of these lines are going to mesh. They're all going to be in the same point because, again, we have an even number. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this line here, and take it from that point and put it on every other line of intersection up until we get to the top. Okay, that will give us the lines we need to actually develop this thing across. Now, this is just one frustrum. It's going to go up, it's going to go down, it's going to go up, it's going to go down. You've seen the development on page 2 of the handout. But these ones going to be a little bit nastier to work out, especially as some of these are very close in height. So I'm going to change the color of this, and I'm going to change it to something that might be more visible on screen, but not too good on the printout. I'm going to make it a nice bright green on one side, and then if I grab the other one, actually I might need to escape out of that first and just left click the other one. I'm going to go up there, and you can see it's quite a nice with the yellow, but when it prints out on white, not too much. I'm going to do it like an orangey color. Okay, you could pick any one of the colors, but basically I'm going to do a green and an orange. Okay, so I'm going to need 2 lines on this. I'm going to want to go across to at least about there. So I'm just going to grab a polyline whilst I'm still in what should be orange. I think I'll miss that there, so I'm just going to make it orange. I'm going to grab myself a polyline. I'm going to grab this top edge because that's going to be exactly where it's going to pick, right over there. Okay, so I'm going to grab it from there, and I'm going to pull it across so that it is even. Make sure you keep that little green line shooting out, and then I'm going to copy it down those parts. So now I'm going to use my copy command, which is in the modify on the left hand side, and I'm going to grab this object and then copy this down all the way down where the orange hits the upward lines, including the outside of the object. Okay, right, this is a good point to stop right now. We still have to do the other side, and then we have to make the other lines, but basically I want to keep these videos less than about 18 minutes so that we can do a bit. You can look back, then we do the second part of the video, look back, etc. So we'll tie it up for here. This is what we've got so far. Let me zoom that back, and I'll see you in part 2.